All right, what is good, everyone? Welcome back to the Heart to Heart podcast. My name is Hafiz, and this is the third season and 11th episode. And today we have a special guest, Doug. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. It's great to be here. And I do a lot of podcasts. This one's going to be unusual.
Please don't make this complicated. What about the time we wasted on our love?
All right, so we're gonna jump right into the gaming aspect of it. For those of you who don't know how it works, we're gonna be asking each other three lighthearted questions, and in our answers, we have to incorporate three random words into it. You ready to get started?
I'm ready.
All right, let's get it. Okay. So my question for you is, if you had to choose between always having to lie or never telling a lie again, which one would you pick? And your words are integrated and observation.
Well, first, I want to make an observation that that's a really impossible question to ask because there are times when you absolutely have to lie. And to say that you would never lie, of course, would be a lie itself. And then that gets me to the second problem where you really want to be an integrated being. So I think what I would say is that I would miss lying, but I would prefer not to lie rather than to lie.
Nice, nice. Look at you already being a pro at this. Well done.
All right. So, Hafiz, you walk into a pet store and a dog is at the checkout counter standing up, and the dog says, "Hello." What do you say? And your words are pop, castle, and pool.
Wow. Okay. Very interesting scenario. The first thing I'd wonder is what type of castle am I in? Because that's not real life. And it has to be an imaginary one, obviously, because a dog talking is just like it's out the roof. I would stare at it for a bit. I would question it. I would question myself. I would question um the whole world, the whole reality, and then I'd probably just wave back and say hi. I feel like I'm the type of person to do that. And then on my way out, I'd just grab a can of pop. I don't drink pop, but like, I mean, it's a special occasion. Why not just grab one and take it, and then just head back home and hop in the pool and question my life ever since then? Because that is a very, very weird interaction there, and very good question. I gotta admit that.
All right, that was
All
good.
right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. My next question for you. If you had to choose between people knowing everything about you or knowing nothing about you, all right? Let's say somehow it's possible to happen and you had to pick one. Which one would you pick? And your words are seminar, feast, and pension.
Well, I think that I would choose that people know nothing about me because then they'd be getting a seminar as they learn about my life experiences. And they really get quite a feast of the knowledge and experience and interesting stories I've accumulated over many decades. And I also think that my pension would be safe because people wouldn't be attacking me.
Smart, smart, smart. I like that. I like how you integrated it. Well done.
Okay, next question. You just won a $100 million lottery and the TV guru is out front. What do you say? Your words are wealth, loss, and reduction.
Wow. First off, I'd be at a loss of words because that's a lot of wealth right there. Um, it's a lot of wealth there. So I'd probably just look at them and be like, did this really happen? Did this really happen? And then I'd realize um how much of a reduction of stress that would occur because of well being not an issue anymore forever. Um, and maybe just say, a quick thank you. Maybe run around the whole platform just because of the excitement that I can't contain within myself. Definitely celebrate. Uh, I don't know what else I would do, to be honest. I haven't imagined it, and I don't want to imagine it yet because a lot of work that I need to do, and it's very unlikely to happen. So, yeah, probably just be in shock and awe, and just let my let the adrenaline take it from here, basically.
Cute.
All
Cute.
right, thank you. All right, so. My last question for you is, let's say you had to pick between an Android phone, an iPhone, or a combination of the best features of both phones into one.
What
So
was
let's
the
say you
first
had
phone?
to,
The
so an
first one?
Android phone,
Android. Okay.
an iPhone, or a combination of both that had the best features of both of them. I know some people die hard on one end, so here's where that's I guess this is where it gets interesting. So which one of those would you pick? All right, and your words are plan, welcome, and short.
Well, I always welcome innovation. And my short answer would be, wouldn't it be wonderful if the best of the Android and iPhone could be combined? But of course, that will never happen because they both have plans with telephone companies that make them a lot of money, and they would never be willing to share their technology to create something that would be really useful for all of us without the flaws of either one.
Solid, solid. I can't argue with that. Well done.
All right, my last question.
Yes.
Your boss asks for your input on the new color scheme in her office. What do you say? And your words are rubbish, I, and personality.
Okay. Um, the first thing I would hope is that they do have a good personality, because if they don't, then it becomes a bit difficult to navigate such a scenario. Um, I'd use my eyes to look at it and hope it's not rubbish, and just give honest feedback, again on the condition that the personality is good. If not, I'll just, like, I wouldn't lie. I just decrease the amount of things I'd say. But yeah, I'd like to. I generally like to give feedback, with my ideas and whatnot. It's after that, if I find out, ooh, they're not really receptive to feedback or something along the lines of that, then it'd be like, okay, maybe not the right person to be giving feedback. They don't really want feedback. So yeah, that's a good question though. Yeah.
Good
Okay,
answer.
awesome.
Good answer. Way to dodge.
Thank you. Some point, it's gotta be learned in life. It's
That's
got.
right.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. This gaming session was really, really fun. I want to start off by asking you, what is the journey?
The journey.
Yeah.
The journey of my life
Um,
or any journey?
any journey. The
Okay.
process
Well,
of,
that's a great question.
yeah.
Here's what I think. Honestly, I think the journey for every human being is to learn how to be emotionally competent, and from that process, slowly evolve into self-actualization, which is an idea that you are internally content, satisfied, and calm at all times, no matter what the situation is. And you are basically one with yourself in the universe. That is the journey.
How does someone achieve that? Let's say someone is completely lost, and they want like guidance on at least where to start. How does someone achieve that?
Well, I think there are, as the Hindus say, there are many paths to the top of the mountain. The path that am finding the easiest to teach and the easiest to learn is to begin mastering your emotions. Because if you don't have mastery over your emotions, then and you believe in rationality, then you're destined to a life of unhappiness. There is no such thing as rationality. Neuroscientists like Antonio Damasio now tell us we're 98% emotional and only 2% rational. So we should really be spending our time developing our emotional competencies. And once you learn how to become emotionally competent, you're emotionally self-aware, you can emotionally self-regulate, and you can understand and reflect back the emotional experiences of another person from that person's perspective. Everything changes because all of a sudden, all the conflict and the arguments and the hurt and the loneliness, it all goes away because now you recognize every human person for what they are, an emotional being, not a rational being. And that's where it starts. We have been lied to for 4,000 years by philosophers and theologians who have taught us that emotions are bad, emotions are weak, emotions are evil. To be emotional is to be irrational. To feel emotion is not to be human. This goes back even way before Plato and Aristotle, but they started, and the Greeks started really writing about this, and it was picked up by Augustine, the Bishop of Hippo, who was the person that constructed the Catholic theology. Augustine was a Neoplatonist, and which means he followed the Greek philosopher Plato. So much of the Catholic philosophy or theology is based on Platonism, not on Christianity. And he wrote that the only way to get to heaven is through reason. And women can't reason, therefore they don't go to heaven. And of course, that became the justification for centuries of abuse. And so we have this long, long history of emotions being bad, emotions being evil. And so in many cultures, including our Western culture, men especially are taught that in order to be virile and to be sexy and to be strong and to survive, you can't feel anything. That's where it all comes from. And it turns out that it's the most pervasive, insidious form of abuse that can exist. When a little boy is told at 2 years old, when he falls down and skins his knee, not to cry, to be a big boy, to be a manly man, to not be a sissy, the parents that tell him that are literally destroying his brain. This is the new teachings of neuroscience, literally destroying his brain. And there's a study called the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, that shows that when this childhood abuse occurs, this emotional invalidation occurs, the way that it does in most families, there's 1,000% chance, a greater chance of that child growing up and dying at an early age of cancer or diabetes or many, many other horrible diseases as a result of the emotional abuse that started in childhood. This is pervasive. 96%, according to Virginia Satir, a family therapist from the 1970s, 80s, 96% of all families are emotionally dysfunctional and produce emotionally dysfunctional adults. And I work in prisons. I teach murderers how to be peacemakers. And of course, there it's really extreme. But what I have found, that when I teach my incarcerated students how to manage their emotions, how to be emotionally competent, how to listen to emotions, they regain their humanity and become powerful leaders and peacemakers in their prisons. And of the several thousand that I've trained that have been released on parole, there's not one report of recidivism by any of them. So I know that the skills that we teach around emotions work. They're supported by neuroscience, and they're supported by a decade and a half of field work in prisons. So that's the reason that we suffer from this is because of 4,000 years of lies, and the correction is, of course, to learn how to learn about emotions in an appropriate way. And the neuroscience tells us there's a way to do this that works, which is what I teach.
What's a way not to do it? Like, let's say I'm looking at someone trying to do it, and and if I see it, I should be like, yo, like, that's not how it's done.
Right. So I think that the best example, I just gave the example of a 2-year-old boy who is invalidated when he skins his knee. He's told not to cry. So emotional invalidation is the first primary deadly thing that we do to our people. So people will say, "Get over it. Don't be a drama queen. It's not that big a deal." Well, I do listen to you. Oh, you're not being rational. All these phrases like that, and there are hundreds of them, are all emotionally invalidating statements. Whenever you see anybody emotionally invalidate another person, that is what you do not do. A second thing that you do not do is try to solve problems. So somebody might be emotional, and you jump right in and you say, well, of course, if you just did it this, this, and this, and this, the problem would go away and you'd be all fixed. No big deal. And of course, the reaction to that is almost always enraged anger from problem solving. So we can't problem solve either. So that's wrong. The correct thing to do when somebody is emotional is to do what is known as affect labeling, or simply reflecting back somebody's emotional experience. So I would say, hey, Hafiz, man, you're really angry. You're really pissed off. You feel completely disrespected. Nobody's listening to you. You're really anxious. And you don't feel appreciated. You feel completely betrayed. And that really pisses you off. and you're a little bit shamed because you're so upset about this. And at the end of the day, you feel really abandoned and completely unloved. And right now, you're feeling pretty worthless. So I just went through 6 layers of emotions. Of course, you're not angry or upset right now, but uh, but by reflecting back your emotions that way, it triggers certain things inside your brain that allows a part of your brain called the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex to activate. That's the thinking part of your brain. And the amygdala and other limbic regions associated with emotions to be inhibited or to quiet down. So when I label your emotions, I am at the same time activating your ability to process and think, and at the same time slowing down all of your emotions so they can no longer dominate what's going on inside you. And that's the power of affect labeling. And this has all been established by brain scanning studies by neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman at UCLA. Very powerful stuff.
Yeah. Um, so okay, I kind of struggle this at times when like someone tells me about a problem, like I just jump straight into problem solving. What
Right.
I try to do is tell people, hey, like if you want me to just listen, just tell me ahead of time and so on and so forth. But what would you suggest on my end, for instance, or someone who's trying to not jump into problem solving? What would you suggest them to do?
So the solution is to understand, why do you jump into problem solving? Or why do we emotionally invalidate? We know that when somebody emotionally invalidates us or tries to problem solve when we're upset, we get upset. We don't like it. But then why do we do it to other people? What's going on here, Hafiz, is that we're trying to soothe our own anxiety. So we're going to go to problem solving because if I can fix your problem and stop you from feeling bad, then I'm not going to feel anxious and I'll feel better about myself. So you stop feeling whatever you're feeling and do this, this, and this, and this, so that I'll feel better about myself and I won't feel anxious. That's the real dialogue that's going on. So the secret is to learn to recognize your own anxiety around other people's strong emotions and then learn how to manage that anxiety, mostly by reflecting back the angry person's emotional experience, so that you can remain calm and centered while somebody is upset.
So how about the so okay, so I see your point, like I completely see it. However, maybe I'm not understanding correctly, but like I feel like it more so at times, at least when I do it, more so comes from the idea of genuinely wanting them to be in a better situation. Like,
Oh, okay. So here's what I teach my students.
mhm,
Calm people down first, then go to problem solving. I'm not saying don't problem solve at all. I'm saying
mhm.
when the mistake we make is by problem solving too early. Get people calmed down. Get them thinking again. Then you can engage them in whatever problem solving process seems to be appropriate, of which there are many.
Well, what are some problem solving techniques? Because like, actually, I'm gonna let you answer that. What are some problem solving techniques?
So there's a broad continuum of different possibilities. One is to do nothing. And you would be amazed at how often, if you simply calm somebody down by reflecting back their emotions, what's known as affect labeling, that you don't have to do anything else. They're able, now their brain has come back online, they're able to think themselves and they can just solve their own problem. You don't have to do anything. That actually happens about 95% of the time. Another way of the next level up would be to do some coaching, what we call results-based listening, where by asking questions, some very specific questions, people begin to solve the problem themselves through kind of a guided process that you lead them through. And then the next level after that, I mean, it depends on how difficult the problem is. You can go to other kind of problem solving processes like critical thinking skills or linear problem solving, many different formulas for doing that kind of work, looking for alternatives, defining the problem, looking for alternatives, deciding on what the criteria are that you're going to use for choosing one of your alternatives, choosing an alternative, looking at the outcome, and then making adjustments as appropriate. If you're dealing with conflict, you can negotiate, and if most people don't have good negotiation skills, so some conflicts get resolved that way, but then you can bring in a third person called a mediator to help you solve the conflict. And if that doesn't work, then you can go to an outside party like a judge or a jury or an arbitrator to make a decision for you. In emergency situations, you might want to use coercion. So, for example, if I had a heart attack and I was in the emergency room, I don't want the cardiac nurses negotiating with the cardiac surgeon over what to do, right? I want
Okay.
I want somebody to make a decision, and in that situation, making a decision coercively is life saving. So it becomes very important. So there's just a whole range of different things we can do to help people solve problems. The key is knowing when to do it, when to help them, and you only do it after you've got them calmed down.
Awesome. I had another question. Is there a difference, should there be a different approach when dealing with men who are like having a moment emotionally versus when women are having one, or is it biologically the same across the board?
It's the same across the board. What is different is there are display rules, what they're called emotional display rules, that are in effect in the culture that you're in. And even though we live in what we call Western culture, there's still many, many, many subcultures. And so you can be in your family culture, and display rules around emotion says that you can display some emotions, but not other emotions can't be displayed. You can be in a corporate culture that maybe in a corporate culture men are allowed to display anger and frustration, but are not allowed to show empathy and compassion. Whereas women are expected to show empathy and compassion in a corporate environment, but are not allowed to show anger or frustration. These aren't gender-based. They're display rules that are culturally created. And they're culturally created over a period of time because that's what they make people feel more comfortable. These rules are designed to make people, they're unconscious rules, but they're designed to soothe anxiety. So men are allowed to be angry, and women are not. A woman gets angry and frustrated and asserts herself in the way that most women should, I think, and they're called bitches. A man who cries is called a weak and unreliable. These are all pejoratives based on emotions that are inherent in who we are as human beings, and it's all wrong. But that's what's driving it. So I don't think it's as much gender based as it is culture based.
Okay, awesome. So let's say someone's in an environment where everyone around them does not acknowledge how they feel or certain reactions to specific situations. What should they do? Let me give two specific scenarios. Well, two scenarios here. One where someone could make a move, but another one where someone cannot quite make a move for whatever reason.
Okay, so listening to emotions and reflecting emotions requires a lot of discernment, because you are opening up a lot of vulnerability. And so the context in which you are reflecting emotions becomes important. If I'm in a room, a conference room, let's say, and all of a sudden there's a lot of anger, whether or not I intervene to try to calm things down depends upon my role of being in that room. If I'm there as a leader, say as a mediator or as a leader, then I am going to calm the room down by listening to emotions and reflecting them. If I am a participant, I may not do that because I do not want to step on the power of the leader. But if I see that the leader has lost control, and it's an important meeting, then I probably would step in and start calming people down. So you have to be discerning and careful. If I'm in a group meeting that I'm leading and somebody becomes disruptive in the meeting, I will calm that person down. But how deep do I go with my emotional reflection is going to be dependent upon how integrated and intimate the group is. And so I may only go to anger or disrespect. I may not go down to the bottom, which is abandonment and feeling unloved and no self-esteem, feeling unworthy. May not go there because it's too personal. So you have to use a lot of discernment when you do this to decide, when do I intervene? Should I intervene? And if I do intervene, how deep do I go? How deep do I have to go in order to calm somebody down? On the other hand, if I'm at home, I'll go pretty deep, pretty fast, because it's a private, personal environment where that's appropriate. Now, what do you do with people who are shut down, or they're emotionally avoidant, or they are emotionally unavailable? See a lot of those, don't you? You ever met any women that are emotionally unavailable? Just a few, and as there are many men. The reason that people are emotionally unavailable or emotionally shut down is because, number one, they have been invalidated all their lives, from the time they were babies. So they have never felt emotionally safe. They've been emotionally hurt. And the only way that they have learned to protect themselves from that pain of rejection and abandonment and not feeling loved or lovable is to build up a wall around them. And they just put up this big wall that they don't let anybody inside that wall because the pain inside that wall is too great to bear. And sometimes they'll wall the pain off so they don't have to feel it. Sometimes they'll be inside the wall with the pain and they'll suffer from it, but they're not able to deal with it. And what's really interesting is when you learn how to reflect back emotions, you blow through that wall like a superhero. And good things can happen, but you can also scare people because all of a sudden they realize that that wall they had is invisible to you, and you see them for who they really are. And in the right circumstances, that can be very powerful. If you're not careful, though, you can really scare people, and that's not appropriate.
I will ask you one last question on this topic. Let's say you've had an environment where you've opened up to someone and they've used it against you, and I guess that's kind of where people
Okay.
build up the wall
Exploitation.
and whatnot.
Exploitation.
Yes.
So the fear of exploitation is always big. And the question is how, if you are truly competent with your emotions and you're able to be self-aware and you're able to self-regulate and you're also able to use true empathy, really understand and reflect back somebody else's emotions, you are really in a position of strength. And you'll never be perceived as weak. You'll never be perceived as out of control. In fact, if you're in a leadership position, you'll be the leader that everyone wants to follow because you literally listen people into existence. And that's what almost every human being wants more than anything else, is to be deeply validated. So I can't imagine a situation where you're in this, you have this emotional competency and your emotions can be exploited. It's interesting that you should ask the question because when my colleague Laura Coffer and I began the Prison of Peace project back in 2009, and we were building the curriculum to train incarcerated people how to be peacemakers, that was one of the major questions we asked ourselves. We're going to teach these people some very powerful listening skills and empathy skills. What's the likelihood that they're going to be able to take these skills and use them for ill rather than for good? And we thought about it and thought, that's not going to happen because you cannot listen to somebody else's emotion and reflect them back if you have evil intent in your heart. It's a heart-based practice, and so it only works if you are truly interested in calming somebody down. If you're not, the BS detectors will go up and people will recognize that you're trying to manipulate them and the fight's on, so to speak.
Okay. What advice would you have for someone in their 20s?
Ooh, 20s. So in your 20s, your brain isn't completely formed until you're 24, 25 years old. So you're still growing. You're still maturing. In the 20s is early 20s, probably in college, mid to late 20s, maybe graduate school, maybe you're starting your career. I'd say two things as I look back on my life. Number one, develop your emotional competency. That skill is a foundational skill of life. It will change your personal relationships, your intimate relationships in ways you could never imagine, and it will make you a powerful person within your profession or work. Number two, we all got to work, well, not everybody, but most people have to work for a paycheck. To the degree that you can, work for something that you're passionate about, something that you really enjoy doing. And I think most 20-year-olds recognize today that they're not stuck in the same job for 30 years like their grandparents were. So mobility is good. Think about, give yourself some time to think about where you want to be in 10 years. So let's say you're 22 years old, maybe right out of college. Where do you want to be when you're 32? And think about what kind of lifestyle you want to have, what kind of career you want to have, where you want to be financially, and then think about, what do I have to do every day? Just one thing every day to reach that goal when I'm 32. Now here's the cool thing about goals, is they change all the time. But just because they change doesn't mean that you have a goal, because you may turn to 22 and a half and say, that goal that I wanted 9.5 years from now, I don't want anymore. I want something different. But here's my next goal. As long as you have a goal and you're working towards it, you're good. And also recognize that you are going to reinvent yourself every 5 years. Our culture and society is changing so fast that what you learned 3 years ago is not relevant today. And so you have to constantly be reinventing yourself, making yourself more valuable, making yourself more knowledgeable, making yourself more personable. Because it's that kind of flexibility of thinking and being is what's going to be the predicate of success in the 21st century.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much for all your input. Any last statements, thoughts before we end this off?
No, I mean, I would tell people, if you want to learn more about my work, actually I have a website, a web page for your audience that I created. Go to Doug Noll, DOUGNOLL.co, Hafiz. And on that page, you'll find resources that describe more and more about some of it's free, some of it you pay for, it's up to you, that will describe more about my work and how you can learn the skills that I've talked about. DougNoll.co/Hafiz.
And with that, I do want to take a moment. Thank you. And with that, I do want to take a moment to say thank you so much for all your wisdom and all your knowledge. I really, really appreciate the time that you took today to talk, to educate people. I have talked a lot about emotional intelligence as like one of the key aspects alongside physical health and mental strength. So I really do appreciate the insight that you've provided today.
You're
And
welcome. I got to tell you, I really love this show. I mean, those three questions, those are hysterical.
thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. That
Thank
was
you.
really fun. I really appreciated that.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you so much. All
Okay.
right. With that being said, I'm going to end it off here. Thank
Okay,
you so
Hafiz. Thank
much.
you so
And I
much.
will talk to everyone later. Take care.